Commander Elias Kane stood in the corner of the royal throne room like a piece of furniture that nobody wanted but everyone had to accept. He was the human guard assigned to protect Queen Valorous of the ascended throne, and he knew exactly how little that position meant to anyone who mattered in this galaxy. The galactic hegemony was a collection of 12 elder races that had ruled the stars for over 10,000 years, and they viewed humanity the same way a king might view a clever dog, useful for certain tasks, but never truly equal, never truly worthy of respect. Kane had served in the Terran military for 15 years before being selected for the exchange program, and he had thought it was an honor when his name was called. How wrong he had been. Queen Valorous was the wife of Prince Corveth, third in line to the hegemony's grand throne, and she was beautiful in the way that ancient things are beautiful. Her skin was pale blue like a frozen ocean. Her eyes were silver pools that seemed to hold the light of distant galaxies, and her white hair flowed down her back like a waterfall of starlight. She was also over 300 years old, and had never once spoken directly to Kane in the 6 months he had served as her guard. To her, he simply did not exist as a person worth acknowledging. The elder races all possessed what they called psychic resonance, a natural connection to the energy that flowed through the universe. They could feel each other's emotions, communicate without words, and touch the minds of lesser beings when they chose to do so. Humans had none of this gift. Scientists from Earth had studied this phenomenon for decades and could not understand why humanity alone among all intelligent species lacked this ability. The elder races had their own explanation, of course. They believed humans were simply too primitive, too young as a species, too spiritually undeveloped to have evolved such gifts. Kane had heard all the insults and whispers during his time at the palace. The other guards called humans the blind ones because they could not sense the psychic currents that flowed through every room. The servants called them hollow walkers because their minds were empty and silent to those who could read thoughts. None of it bothered Kane anymore because he had learned to accept his place in this galaxy. Humanity had only discovered faster-than-light travel 40 years ago, and they were still considered newcomers to the galactic stage. Perhaps in another 1,000 years, things would be different, but Kane would not live to see that day. Or at least, that was what he told himself when the loneliness became too heavy to bear. He watched Queen Valorous from his position near the eastern pillar as she received visitors from across the hegemony. Ambassadors and nobles came to pay their respects, each one bowing low and exchanging those silent psychic greetings that Kane could never participate in. He was like a deaf man at a concert, knowing that beautiful music was playing, but unable to hear a single note. Prince Corveth entered the throne room in the late afternoon, his tall form dressed in the ceremonial armor of the royal house. He was handsome in the way all elder race males were handsome, with sharp features and eyes that glowed faintly with inner power. He nodded to his wife and took his place beside her throne. The prince had spoken to Kane exactly once, on the day the human arrived at the palace. He had looked at Kane the way someone might look at a new piece of furniture, and had said only for words, "Do not fail us." Kane had no intention of failing, though he often wondered what good he could possibly do if real danger ever came. The royal guard was made up of elite warriors from the karate species, 7-foot-tall beings with forearms and the ability to project psychic shields that could stop plasma fire. What could one human soldier do that they could not? But orders were orders, and the exchange program was important for Earth's standing in the hegemony. So Kane stood at his post day after day and watched a world he could never truly be part of. The festival of stellar convergence was approaching, and the palace was busy with preparations. Servants ran through the halls carrying decorations and food, while artists worked on massive light sculptures that would fill the sky above the palace. When the celebration began, it was the most important holiday in the hegemony, marking the day 10,000 years ago when the first elder races had formed their alliance. Kane had been given a new uniform for the occasion, black and silver with the crest of the royal house on his chest. He looked at himself in the mirror of his small quarters and saw a man he barely recognized. There were new lines on his face, and his brown eyes held a weight that had not been there 3 years ago. 3 years since Nexus 7. He closed his eyes and pushed the memory away, but it never stayed buried for long. It rose up in his dreams and whispered to him in quiet moments, reminding him of the thing he had done and the secret he now carried. On that terrible day in the collapsing stellar nursery, Cain had made a mistake that should have killed him. Instead, it had changed him in ways he still did not fully understand. He carried something inside him now, something that burned and pulsed like a second heartbeat, something that the elder races, with all their psychic power, could never detect, because it was hidden deep within his hollow human mind. He had told no one about what happened at Nexus 7. The official report said that Cain was the sole survivor of his squad, that he had escaped the nursery's collapse through luck and quick thinking. No one had questioned him too closely, because no one really cared about the details of how one human soldier had survived. But Cain knew the truth, and the truth terrified him. He was no longer entirely human, and he was definitely not entirely himself. There was something else living inside him, something vast and ancient and impossibly powerful. And one day it would either consume him completely or burn its way out of his body in a blaze of nuclear fire. Until that day came, he would stand at his post and guard a queen who did not know he existed, serving an empire that saw him as nothing more than a useful animal. The festival was only 3 days away, and Cain had a feeling that something was coming. He did not know what it was or how he knew, but the thing inside him had been restless lately, stirring in its sleep like a beast sensing a storm on the horizon. He hoped he was wrong. He hoped the festival would pass without incident, and that he would continue his quiet life as the invisible human guard. But hope was a fragile thing in a galaxy that had never shown humanity any kindness. And somewhere deep in the darkness between stars, the enemies of the hegemony were making their own plans for the Festival of Stellar Convergence. The night of the Festival of Stellar Convergence was the most beautiful night Cain had ever seen. The sky above the palace was filled with dancing lights of every color, and massive holographic displays showed the history of the hegemony. Stretching back 10,000 years, music played from invisible speakers, and the air itself seemed to vibrate with joy and celebration. The throne room was packed with guests from across the galaxy, nobles and ambassadors in their finest clothes, military commanders wearing medals earned in wars that had ended before humanity even discovered fire, and ancient scholars whose minds held more knowledge than all of Earth's libraries combined. It was a display of power and wealth that made Cain feel very small indeed. Queen Valeris sat on her throne in a gown of woven starlight that shifted colors as she moved. She was smiling, which was rare, and even laughing at jokes told by the guests who approached to pay their respects. Prince Corveth stood beside her, his hand resting on the back of her throne in a gesture that showed both protection and affection. Cain stood at his usual post near the eastern pillar, watching the crowd and trying to ignore the strange restlessness that had been building inside him all day. The thing in his chest was awake and alert, pulsing with an energy that made his skin feel too tight for his body. The royal guard was positioned around the room in their usual formation, their four-armed bodies still as statues and their psychic shields ready to activate. At the first sign of danger, they were the best warriors in the hegemony, trained from birth to protect the royal family. And Cain knew that his presence was purely symbolic compared to theirs. The attack came at midnight, just as the grand display was about to begin. One moment the room was filled with laughter and music, and the next moment the air itself seemed to tear open like paper. Black rifts appeared throughout the throne room, holes in reality that led to somewhere cold and dark and terrible. From these rifts came the assassins, figures wrapped in shadows that seemed to move like smoke. They carried blades that dripped with a green liquid, and Cain knew without being told that this was soul-rot poison, a substance so deadly that even the immortal elder races could not survive its touch. The royal guard reacted instantly, their psychic shields flaring to life in a brilliant display of blue light. But the assassins moved too fast and too strangely, slipping through the shields as if they did not exist. The first guard fell with a blade in his chest, his forearms going limp as the poison began its terrible work. Screams filled the throne room as guests tried to flee, but more rifts were opening near the exits, cutting off all escape. The assassins moved through the crowd like wolves through sheep, striking down anyone who got in their way. Kane pushed through the panicking crowd toward the throne, his hand reaching for the plasma pistol at his hip. He could see Prince Corveth stepping in front of his wife, his own psychic barriers blazing to life around them both. The prince was powerful, one of the strongest psychics in the royal line, and for a moment it seemed like his shields might hold. But then 5 assassins attacked at once, their shadow blades piercing the barriers from 5 different angles. The shields shattered like glass, and one blade found its mark in the prince's shoulder. Corveth cried out and fell to his knees as the poison began to spread through his veins. Queen Valeris caught her husband as he fell, her silver eyes wide with a fear that Kane had never seen on her ancient face. She tried to raise her own barriers, but she was not a warrior, and her power was not meant for combat. The assassins closed in around her, their blades raised for the killing blow. And that was when something inside Kane finally snapped. He did not remember deciding to move. One moment he was pushing through the crowd, and the next moment he was standing between the queen and the assassins, his plasma pistol firing shot after shot into the swirling mass of shadows. The assassins turned their attention to him, amused that a mere human would dare to interfere. 3 of them broke away from the group and advanced on Kane with their poisoned blades, moving with a speed that no human should have been able to track. But Kane was no longer entirely human. The thing inside his chest exploded outward like a sun being born, and light poured from his eyes and hands and mouth. It was not the gentle blue glow of psychic power, but something far more primal, a burning white radiance that pushed back the shadows and made the assassins scream in pain. Kane moved through them like a force of nature, his body burning with the fire of a dead star. He did not fight like a soldier anymore, but like something ancient and terrible. Something that had been sleeping inside him for 3 long years and was finally awake. His fist connected with an assassin's chest, and the creature simply came apart, its shadow body unable to withstand the nuclear fire that now flowed through Kane's veins. Another assassin tried to stab him with its poisoned blade, but the blade melted before it could touch his skin. The other assassins saw what was happening and turned their attention from the queen to this impossible human who burned with starlight. It was a mistake that cost them everything. Kane killed them one by one, his body moving with a speed and power that he had never known he possessed. He did not think about what he was doing, did not plan his attacks, did not feel fear or doubt or hesitation. He simply acted, and everything he touched died. In 90 seconds, 43 void cultists lay dead on the floor of the throne room. Kane stood in the center of the carnage, his chest heaving and his hands still glowing with fading light. The thing inside him was satisfied now, settling back into its sleep like a beast that had just finished hunting. The throne room was silent except for the moans of the wounded. Nobles and guards alike stared at Kane with expressions of pure shock, unable to understand what they had just witnessed. Queen Valeris still knelt beside her fallen husband, but her silver eyes were fixed on Kane's face. She had seen the light pouring from his eyes, had felt the impossible heat radiating from his body, had watched a single human soldier destroy an army of shadow assassins in less than 2 minutes. Kane met her gaze, and for the first time in 6 months, she truly saw him, not as furniture, not as a political gesture, not as a primitive savage playing at being civilized. She saw him as something she did not understand, something that should not exist, something that terrified her more than the assassins ever could. "What are you?" she whispered, her voice barely loud enough to hear. Kane looked at his hands, still smoking from the power that had flowed through them, and he realized that his secret was no longer his own. The mistake he had made at Nexus 7 had finally caught up with him, and nothing would ever be the same again. The medical wing of the palace was quiet in the hours after the attack. Prince Corveth lay in a healing chamber while teams of doctors worked to remove the soul rot poison from his body. They said he would survive, but the recovery would take weeks or even months, and he would never be as strong as he once was. Queen Valeris had refused to leave her husband's side, but she had sent guards to find Kane and bring him to her. He had expected to be taken to a prison cell, had expected to be questioned and examined and perhaps executed for hiding such a dangerous secret. Instead, he was brought to a small garden inside the medical wing where the queen waited alone, The garden was filled with flowers from 100 different worlds, their petals glowing softly in the dim light. A small fountain made sounds like music as water flowed over carved stones from some ancient civilization. It was a place of peace and beauty, and it felt strange to Cain after the violence of the throne room. Queen Valeris stood with her back to him, looking at a flower that bloomed only in starlight. Her gown was still stained with her husband's blood, but she had not taken the time to change. There were more important things on her mind. "I have lived for 327 years, she said without turning around. "I have seen wars that lasted centuries, and I have watched stars die. And I have known beings of such power that they could reshape reality with a thought. But I have never seen anything like what you did tonight." Cain did not know what to say, so he remained silent and waited for her to continue. "The Void Cultists are the most dangerous assassins in the galaxy," the Queen went on. "They exist partially outside of normal space, which is why our psychic shields cannot stop them. We have lost emperors and generals and heroes to their blades, and no one has ever been able to fight them the way you did." She finally turned to face him, and Cain saw something in her silver eyes that he had never seen before. It was not anger or fear, but a desperate need to understand. "What are you?" she asked again, the same question she had asked in the throne room. Cain took a deep breath and felt the thing inside his chest stir at the memory of what he was about to share. It had been sleeping since the fight, satisfied and peaceful, but it seemed to know that its secret was about to be revealed. 3 years ago, I was part of a squad sent to investigate a stellar nursery called Nexus 7. Cain began. It was supposed to be a simple observation mission, a chance for human scientists to study the birth of new stars alongside hegemony researchers. Nobody expected anything to go wrong. The Queen listened in silence, her ancient eyes never leaving his face. Something happened to one of the young stars in the nursery. It began to collapse in on itself, dying before it had even truly been born. The scientists said it was impossible, that stars do not die that way. But it was happening right in front of us. Cain's voice grew quieter as the memories came flooding back. He could still see the light of that dying star, could still feel the heat on his face as his ship tumbled through the chaos of the collapsing nursery. The collapse created a gravity wave that destroyed most of our fleet. My squad was trapped in a small shuttle, drifting toward the dying star with no power and no hope of rescue. We were going to be pulled into its heart and burned to nothing. The Queen moved closer, drawn in by the story despite herself. The other members of my squad died quickly. The radiation from the dying star was too much for human bodies to handle, and one by one they stopped breathing. I was the last one alive, and I knew I only had minutes before the radiation killed me too. Cain held up his hands and looked at them as if seeing them for the first time. The same hands that had burned with starlight just hours ago. The same hands that had killed 43 assassins. And then I heard it calling to me. He said softly, "The dying star, it was not just a ball of burning gas. It was alive in some way that I cannot explain, and it was afraid. It did not want to die alone." The Queen's face went pale, her blue skin turning almost white. She understood now, or at least she was beginning to understand. "I did not know what I was doing," Cain continued. "I just reached out with my mind, the way I had seen elder race children reach out to each other. And I tried to comfort it. I told it that I was there, that it was not alone, that someone would remember it even after it was gone." He paused, the memory too painful to put into simple words. "And the star answered me. It poured itself into my mind and my body and my soul. Every bit of fire and light and energy that it had, everything that it was or could have been. It gave itself to me because I was the only one who had listened, the only one who had cared." Tears were running down Cain's face now, though he did not seem to notice them. "I carry a dead star inside me, Your Majesty. Its fusion reactions power my heart. Its nuclear fire runs through my veins. Its will to exist keeps me alive even when I should have died a dozen times over. I am not human anymore, not entirely, and I have no idea what I am becoming." The Queen was silent for a long moment, her mind trying to process what she had just heard. The elder races had tried for thousands of years to bond with stellar consciousness, to merge their minds with the vast intelligence of living stars. Every attempt had ended in failure and death. And yet this human, this primitive being from a primitive world, had done it by accident. "You said you reached out with your mind," she finally said. "But humans have no psychic ability. Your species cannot project thoughts or emotions." Kane nodded slowly, understanding her confusion. "I know. I have asked myself the same question every day for 3 years. How did I do something that should have been impossible for my kind?" He met her eyes with a look of honest confusion. "The only answer I have is that maybe we have been wrong about humans all along. Maybe we do not lack psychic ability. Maybe we just have a different kind of ability. One that nobody has ever discovered because nobody ever bothered to look." The Queen stared at him for a long moment, and then she said something that Kane never expected to hear. "You saved my life tonight, and you saved my husband's life. Whatever you are, whatever you have become, I owe you a debt that can never be repaid." She reached out and took his hand, a gesture that would have been unthinkable just hours ago. "Tell me about Nexus 7, she said. "Tell me everything. I need to understand what you are, and together we will find out what this means for you and for your species." Kane felt something loosen in his chest, a weight he had been carrying for 3 long years. For the first time since that terrible day in the stellar nursery, he was no longer alone with his secret. In the weeks that followed the attack, Queen Valeris found herself watching the human soldier with new eyes. She observed him during his guard duties, studied him during meals, and spent long hours in conversation with him about his life on Earth and his experiences in the stellar nursery. Kane was uncomfortable with the attention at first, but he slowly grew used to the Queen's presence. She was not like the other elder race nobles who looked at humans with barely hidden disgust. Instead, she looked at him with genuine curiosity and something that might have been respect. Prince Corveth remained in the healing chamber, his body slowly recovering from the soul rot poison. The doctors said he was out of danger, but he would not be able to resume his duties for many months. In his absence, Queen Valeris had taken over many of his responsibilities, and Kane found himself accompanying her to meetings and ceremonies throughout the palace. The other nobles did not know what to make of this. The human guard who had saved the royal couple was now walking beside the Queen like an equal, and whispers followed them wherever they went. Some said that Kane had bewitched the Queen with some hidden human magic, while others said that she had simply lost her mind after the trauma of the attack. Queen Valeris did not care what anyone said. She was on a mission to understand the truth about humanity, and nothing would stop her. She brought in scientists and scholars from across the hegemony, the greatest minds in the galaxy, and she set them to work studying everything known about human biology and psychology. She accessed ancient records that had been locked away for thousands of years, looking for any mention of species like humanity that had appeared before. What she found shocked her to her core. "Look at this," she said to Kane one evening in her private study. She was pointing at a holographic display that showed genetic information in complex patterns that Kane could not understand. "This is the genetic structure of a typical elder race being. You can see here that our psychic abilities are encoded in these specific gene sequences. They allow us to connect with the universal energy field and communicate with other psychic beings." She changed the display to show a different pattern. "And this is your genetic structure, Commander. As you can see, you do not have these gene sequences. This is why scientists have always said that humans lack psychic ability." Kane nodded slowly. He had heard this explanation many times before. "But look at this," the Queen said, her voice growing excited. She highlighted a section of his genetic code that glowed bright red. "These sequences here have always been dismissed as junk DNA, genetic material that serves no purpose. But when I compared them to the oldest records in our archives, I found something incredible." She pulled up another display, this one showing ancient symbols and writings from a civilization that had died out millions of years ago. The first ones were the oldest intelligent species in the galaxy, so old that they were already ancient when the elder races were still learning to walk. They left behind very few records, but one of those records described a type of being that they called the Vessels. Kane felt a chill run down his spine as the Queen continued. "The Vessels were not psychic in the way we understand it. They did not project their minds outward into the universe. Instead, they pulled the universe inward into themselves. They could absorb and contain energies, that would destroy any other form of life, including the consciousness of living stars. She turned to face Kane with an expression of wonder and fear. The first ones believed that the vessels were the next step in cosmic evolution, beings designed to bridge the gap between physical matter and pure energy. They predicted that one day a species of vessels would arise that would change the galaxy forever. Kane stared at her, his mind struggling to process what she was saying. "You think humans are these vessels?" "I do not think it. I know it," the Queen replied. "Your junk DNA is not junk at all. It is a blueprint for abilities that have not yet awakened in your species. The potential has always been there, sleeping inside every human being, waiting for the right trigger to bring it to life." She placed her hand on Kane's chest, over the place where he could feel the dead star burning inside him. "You triggered this ability by accident when you reached out to the dying star. You absorbed its consciousness and its power, because that is what humans are designed to do. You are not broken or primitive or lacking. You are simply not finished growing." Kane sat down heavily in a nearby chair, his legs suddenly too weak to hold him. "If this is true, then any human could do what I did. Any human who found themselves in the right circumstances." "Yes," the Queen confirmed. "Your species does not lack psychic ability. You have a different kind of ability, one that is potentially far more powerful than anything the elder races possess." She began to pace around the room, her mind racing with the implications. "The elder races have always believed that we were the pinnacle of evolution, the most advanced beings in the galaxy. We looked at humans and saw primitives who had somehow stumbled into space travel, despite their obvious limitations." She stopped and looked at Kane with eyes that held a new understanding. "But we were wrong. We were so very wrong. Humans are not the beginning of something small. You are the beginning of something vast beyond our understanding." Kane thought about his fellow soldiers, his friends and family back on Earth, the billions of ordinary humans going about their ordinary lives, without any idea of what they might one day become. "What do we do with this information?" he asked. The Queen's expression grew serious. "That is the question that keeps me awake at night, Commander. The hegemony has treated humanity as a lesser species for 40 years. And that treatment has not been kind. If humans ever discover their true potential and remember how they have been treated, the consequences could be devastating." She sat down across from Kane and took his hands in hers. "But there is another path. We could change how the hegemony sees humanity. We could help your species awaken to their potential gradually, peacefully, as allies rather than subjects." Kane felt hope stirring in his chest, mixing with the eternal fire of the star he carried. "And you would do this?" he asked. "You would stand against 10,000 years of tradition and prejudice for a species that most of your people consider little better than animals?" Queen Valeris smiled, and for the first time, Kane saw the woman behind the crown, the person behind the title. "I would do it because it is right," she said simply, "and because I have seen what humans can become. And it is beautiful and terrible and absolutely magnificent." She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars that filled the night sky. "The galaxy is about to change, Commander Kane. The only question is whether that change will bring war or peace, and that choice may rest on the shoulders of one human soldier who made a mistake in a dying stellar nursery." Kane joined her at the window, and together they looked up at the infinite expanse of stars, each one a potential ally or adversary in the struggle to come. 3 months after the assassination attempt, Prince Corveth finally emerged from his healing chamber. He was thinner than before and walked with a slight limp that the doctors said might never fully heal, but his eyes were clear and his mind was sharp, and he was ready to resume his duties. The first thing he did was summon Commander Elias Kane to his private chambers. Kane stood at attention before the prince, his heart beating faster than usual. He did not know what to expect from this meeting. The prince might thank him for saving the queen, or he might have him executed for hiding such a dangerous secret. With the elder races, it was impossible to know. Prince Corveth studied him for a long moment, his glowing eyes searching Kane's face as if looking for something hidden beneath the surface. "My wife has told me everything," the prince finally said. "She has told me about your power, about the star you carry inside you, about the ancient records and what they might mean for your species." Kane remained silent, waiting for the judgment he felt sure was coming. I have also reviewed the security recordings from the night of the attack, the prince continued. I have watched them many times, trying to understand what I was seeing. A single human, burning with the light of a star, killing 43 of the most dangerous assassins in the galaxy. He stood and walked closer to Kane, close enough that Kane could feel the gentle warmth of the prince's psychic aura. I have fought in wars that lasted centuries, the prince said softly. I have faced enemies that would make your worst nightmares seem like pleasant dreams, but I have never seen anything like what you did that night. Kane finally spoke, his voice steady despite his nervousness. I did what any soldier would do, Your Highness. I protected my charge. The prince laughed, a sound that held genuine amusement rather than mockery. Any soldier, he says, as if any soldier could swallow a star and live. As if any soldier could burn through shadow assassins like they were made of paper. He placed his hand on Kane's shoulder, a gesture of respect that Kane had never expected to receive from an elder race noble. You saved my wife's life, Commander. You saved my life as well, though I was too poisoned to know it at the time. For that, I owe you a debt that cannot be measured in any currency the galaxy has to offer. The prince walked to his desk and picked up a small box, made of some dark metal, that seemed to absorb the light around it. My wife has convinced me that the hegemony's treatment of humanity must change. She has shown me the ancient records and helped me understand what your species might one day become. I admit that I was skeptical at first, but the evidence is impossible to deny. He opened the box and removed a medallion on a golden chain. The medallion bore the crest of the royal house, but it was surrounded by symbols that Kane did not recognize. This is the seal of the protector, the prince explained. It has not been awarded to anyone outside the elder races in over 5,000 years. It marks you as a personal guardian of the ascended throne, with all the rights and privileges that position carries. Kane stared at the medallion in disbelief. Your Highness, I cannot accept this. I am just a human soldier, a member of an inferior species that barely knows how to travel between stars. The prince's expression grew serious. That is exactly the kind of thinking that must change, Commander. You are not inferior. You have never been inferior. You have simply been different in ways that we did not understand. He placed the medallion around Kane's neck, and Kane felt a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the star he carried. The hegemony is old and set in its ways, the prince continued. It will not change overnight, but my wife and I have decided to begin that change, starting with you. You will be a symbol of what humans can be, a bridge between our species and yours. Queen Valoris entered the chamber then, her silver eyes bright with satisfaction. She had clearly been listening from somewhere nearby. There's more, she said, joining her husband beside Kane. I have been in contact with the Terran government on Earth. They have agreed to send more humans to serve in the exchange program, and this time they will not be treated as decorative furniture. She smiled at Kane, and he saw the genuine affection in her expression. The galaxy has been watching the wrong horizon for 10,000 years. Commander, we have been looking to the heavens for transcendence, searching the stars for beings more evolved than ourselves. All this time, the answer was right in front of us. She placed her hand on Kane's chest, over his heart, over the fire that burned there. Humans are not the past. You are the future. You are the vessels that the first ones predicted, the bridge between matter and energy, the next step in the evolution of consciousness itself. Kane felt the weight of her words pressing down on him, a responsibility greater than anything he had ever imagined. I am just one man, Your Majesty. I cannot carry the future of my entire species on my shoulders. The Queen laughed, and the sound was like silver bells ringing in a summer breeze. That is exactly what makes you perfect for this role, Commander. A human who is given power and immediately says he is not worthy of it. A human who saves an empire and then apologizes for the inconvenience. She stepped back and looked at him with eyes that had seen centuries pass like days. Your species is too stubborn to know when you should fail. You look at the impossible and you say, "Give me a minute." You carry dying stars in your chests and call it a mistake. This is what makes you terrifying, and this is what makes you wonderful. Kane stood there in his new medallion, the protector of the ascended throne, the first human to hold such a rank in the history of the hegemony. He thought about all the humans back on Earth who had no idea what they might one day become. He thought about the soldiers who had died beside him at Nexus 7, never knowing that they too could have held the heart of a star. He thought about the future that stretched out before him, full of possibility and danger and hope. "I will try to be worthy of this honor," he finally said. "I will try to be a good example of what humanity can be." The Queen nodded, satisfied with his answer. "That is all we ask, Commander. Be yourself, make your mistakes, and never stop reaching for the stars." She turned to face the viewport that showed the endless expanse of the galaxy. Billions upon billions of stars waiting to be explored. "The hegemony has ruled these stars for 10,000 years, she said. "But our time as the masters of the galaxy is ending. A new era is beginning, and humanity will be at the heart of it." Kane joined her at the viewport, the star in his chest burning with a fire that would never die. And he knew that she was right. The galaxy was changing, and nothing would ever be the same again. And somewhere deep in his soul, the dying star that had chosen him whispered its approval, pleased that its sacrifice had not been in vain, happy that its fire would help light the way for a species that was only just beginning to understand its true potential. The human soldier and the alien queen stood together at the edge of forever, looking out at the stars, and for the first time in 40 years of contact between their species, they saw each other as equals. The mistake at Nexus 7 had become the first step on a journey that would change the destiny of the entire galaxy.